How's it going, everyone? Today we're going to be taking a look at some of the Mavic 3 shots that I've taken and edited them. This was shot at ISO 400 at f4 at 1 second of exposure. This was shot on the main camera. Alright, so usually the first thing I do, I choose a profile for the raw file. It's either going to be standard or landscape. Landscape just adds a little bit more saturation. Alright, so I'm going to bring up a little bit of the exposure. Bring down the highlights. Bring up some of the shadows. Bring down the contrast a little bit. Now you can hold the Alt key and bring up the whites. Same thing for the blacks. Once the area goes all the way dark, when it goes all the way black, that means it's completely blacked out. There's no information left in that particular area. So you kind of want to find a medium. Probably going to make it a little cooler. Bring up a vibrance a little bit of saturation. For the effects, you can bring up the texture a little bit. It just adds a sharpness to the photo. You can also do dehaze, especially if this was shot in the summertime, so the humidity is usually higher than usual. You never want to overdo it either. You can also bring up the clarity. I'll probably stick to 10. Usually the curve I leave until I'm done editing the raw file. Color grading. Looks good. I want to give it a cooler, more of a chill look. Alright, so depending on what type of a Photoshop you have, for the newer versions, you have the denoise. And that will get rid of all the grain that we have, which in this case is not that bad. Since it uses AI, it does take a minute. I'm going to choose a darker area. Alright, so this is before, and this is after. And usually it sets at 50, but I'm going to do 35. I don't want to overdo it. If you ever use a denoiser and you have faces in the image, a lot of times it will actually add strange features to the people's faces. So that's not something you really want to use when you have people. Okay, that's done. And as you can see, it's a much cleaner image. All that grain is gone. I'm going to add just a little sharpness. Usually I use the masking tool. I usually like to create a little focus to the center. So I'll increase the contrast a little bit around the corners. It's a very subtle effect. It's nothing that you're going to extremely notice. All right, so this is what we started with. And this is what we have so far. Once it loads, there we go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open the image. So right away, I'm going to make a new mask. We're going to go ahead and start with the curves. I'm going to zoom into the image a little bit. All right, so I always start with the 3 points. Bring this down a little bit. Just gonna bring that to 1. Sometimes you have to be careful with the curve tool because sometimes it will add a little strange defects to the image. It will be bending in the colors. All right. Okay. I'm going to go ahead into the levels. Bring down the darks a little bit. All right, that looks good. Now the next step, I'm going to go into the selective color. First, we're going to start with the reds. Now, for the most part, usually with the colors, it really depends on what looks good to your eye. And that's what you go with. Now, when you are changing the colors, do take a look around. Obviously, I'm doing green, so look at the green areas. Like here, you have the trees, but also look around the surroundings because there's different colors in certain areas. Like here, you have a green neon light. I'm assuming you have a little greenery here, so you want to pay attention to that. So for the cyan, if you notice, nothing is really changing. But once you look at this particular area right here, you have more bluish or more grayish. I'm going to go with a little more gray. Just looks more natural. Now with the blues. And magentas. So for this particular, for magenta, you have it here. This area is going to get affected, and right down here as well. So I took down a little bit of the purplish effect and made it a little bit more pink. All right, I'm happy with this, with these colors. If you're happy with the preset and you wanted to save it, you just click over here on the three lines, and you're gonna hit Save Select Color Preset, and then in here, you just create a title, hit Save, and afterwards you're gonna see it in here, so you don't have to constantly redo it. So I already have some presets that are saved. I have Drone New York City preset. It looks pretty similar to what I just did. The red's a little bit too dark for my opinion for this particular image. So went ahead and hit Control Z to go back to the original preset that I made. Okay. Exit. All right. So hit Shift and the background copy, then merge the layers. So this is before, this is after. I'm going to create another copy. So for this particular scenario, what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit Filter, Other, High Pass. So for the high pass, you just want to see a little bit of the detail. So for 1.5, that's a bit too much. So I'm going to do 0.5, where you can barely see the outline. Hit OK. For this, you hit Overlay. And what you'll notice, the difference, what it makes, it creates a sharper image. If you notice over here, there's graffiti. This is before, and this is after. So it just adds a little bit more detail to the image. I'm going to go ahead and merge the layers. So this is before, and this is after. And you can play around. There's a lot of things you can do. You can go ahead and open it back in the RAW again. So Control Shift A. You can play around with the masking. So let's say you want to play with the selected color. So you go ahead, click on the range. Okay, color range, yes. There you go. And then we can mess around with the curve tool for that particular color. Gonna go ahead and zoom in and be a little closer. So you'll notice I'm gonna try to bring down the highlights a little bit on the roads, so you get to see a little bit more of the detail on that concrete and the cobblestone in this particular case. So this is before, and this is after. So just darkened it a little bit. Actually, I want to bring up the contrast a little bit more too. Okay, so this is before, this is after. So I made the roads a little darker. So you can increase the clarity. For this case, I'm actually going to decrease the clarity a little bit to give it more of a misty look. And then actually you just click on the three dots and do invert the mask. Never mind. Scratch that. Just gonna do another layer. And what I want to do here, I want to do the opposite. I want to increase the clarity. That's good. And then towards the center here, I want to bring up the shadows so I can see the roof detail a little bit more. Maybe make it a little bit cooler. That's good. Actually, for this particular case, I just think this is a little bit too orangey for my personal taste. Gonna make the colors a little cooler on the bridge. Yeah, that looks better. I'm gonna bring up the detail a little bit here, 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 here. These areas are just a little bit too dark, in my opinion, so I'm gonna bring them up. Okay, that looks good. All right, so what I'm gonna do here, just bring up the shadows and a little bit of the exposure, and bring down the highlights a little bit for some of these signs. All right, so that's before and that's after. I would actually like to bring up the shadows in here a little bit more. Awesome. Click OK. All right, so far, this is what we got. If you want, you can create a smoky feel. Blur, saturated blur. Usually stick with 40. Click OK. Decrease the opacity to about 45. And then I usually do soft light or overlay. All right, I'm going to do overlay. Should decrease it a little bit more. It just adds a little bit of that dreamy feel. That looks good. All right, so that's it. And you can keep going, you can keep adjusting, you can go back and edit some of the colors if you don't like. But that's the basic editing that I usually do for the night photography with the drone in particular. I hope you like it. If you'd like to see more of images of me maybe going more detail than this, more extensive,